I sat in my usual corner at the brunch spot my family frequented every weekend. The coffee in front of me had gone cold, but I kept stirring it slowly, an old habit that helped me stay calm. No one paid attention to me because, as always, the spotlight belonged to my sister, Vivian. She sat with her legs crossed, morning sunlight catching the sparkle of the diamond ring on her hand. "Your old job really was a snooze fest," she laughed, her voice loud enough to echo through the cafe. "It's kind of hilarious that someone in their 30s still doesn't have a real job." I heard every word, every pause in her sentence. No one else laughed, just Vivian, the only one amused by her own joke. I didn't look at her. I just pressed my lips together and kept stirring my cold coffee. My mother awkwardly murmured, "Vivian, don't be like that." But my sister only shrugged. To her, silence was proof of failure. My father tried to steer the conversation elsewhere, something about the Eggs Benedict being a little too salty, but Vivian's smirk lingered, like a hook waiting for a reaction. I said nothing. I was never the talkative one at family gatherings, and somehow, that made them assume I had nothing worth saying. But the truth was, ever since I chose to live behind the scenes, silence had become the space where I built an entire world, one none of them could imagine. I remember exactly when I first realized that some of the greatest things didn't need to be shown off. I was 27, sitting beside Sam, my best friend from college, as we typed the first lines of code for what would later become the core of an intelligent data analytics system used by banks, hospitals, and even government agencies. Now, at 33, I'm the co-founder of DataLoom, a tech company valued at over $80 million. 0 cents, but no one in my family knows. I never appeared on the official website. In interviews, Sam was the face of the company, and me? I chose to stay behind the spotlight. My name only appeared on internal documents, investor agreements, and Vivian's pay stub. Funny, isn't it? The sister who never hesitated to mock my quietness is now applying to the company I helped build, completely unaware that the person reviewing her application is the fulfiller she's mocked for years. I watched her chatter on, bragging about the now-defunct accounting firm she worked for. "But it's all good," she waved it off. "I'm a problem solver. I'm targeting a new company. Something called DataLoom? Heard they're hiring." My heart skipped a beat. For the first time during the meal, I looked up, then quickly looked back down, careful to keep the flicker in my eyes unnoticed. She kept going. "I already applied. If they bring me in, I'll handle their budget better than anyone there. If they pass me up, it's their loss." I bit my tongue to keep from laughing. That sentence, bold and smug, was a carbon copy of the lines she used to throw at me, claiming I'd never get anywhere hiding in the shadows. And maybe she'll never realize it, but in that very shadow, I built an empire, one she's now about to walk into, under my leadership. Still, I chose to remain silent, not out of fear, but because I knew the truth would speak for itself. I remember my 12th birthday vividly. While everyone sang happy birthday, Vivian burst out of the living room holding a giant gold trophy. "Our baby just won the state dance competition," my mom beamed, wrapping her arms around Vivian. I stood by my cake, candles flickering in front of me, but no one asked what I wished for. And I didn't even bother blowing them out. Vivian was always like that. Bright, loud, always giving people something to clap for. Me? I quietly gathered my gifts, went to my room, opened the old laptop Dad gave me the year before, and kept building my first data model. Even as a child, I loved what others found boring. I liked taking toys apart to see how they worked. I loved figuring out why a video game ran so smoothly. I loved the feeling of writing a block of code and watching it work flawlessly. My mom used to say, "Eleanor can sit for hours and you won't hear a sound." Dad used to joke, "We've got a firework and a flashlight in this house, guess which is which?" No guessing needed. Vivian was the firework, I was the flashlight. Steady, but overlooked. As we grew older, the gap between us widened. Vivian studied art, made a few appearances on local TV thanks to her dramatic performances. I studied computer science at a tech institute. No one in the family remembers the school's name. When I graduated, they forgot the date entirely. They were too busy planning Vivian's fashion line launch. I don't blame them. Sometimes I thought maybe I just wasn't interesting enough, but silence slowly became the space where I found my value. When Sam and I started Dataloom, all we had were 2 beat-up laptops and a dream to build a flexible analytics system that could predict user behavior in real time. Sam was the talker. He pitched to investors, did press interviews, ran meetings. I was the one backstage, writing every line of code, fixing every bug. A year later, a major bank signed a trial contract. 2 years in, our system was integrated into finance, healthcare, and risk analysis platforms. By year 3, Dataloom was valued at $83 million, 0 cents. I held 49% of the shares. But ask anyone? They'd only know Sam Fletcher. As for Eleanor Green, never featured in a headline. And that was how I wanted it. I didn't care for hollow handshakes, flashing cameras, or whispers behind my back. I wanted to work, to build, to help people make better decisions with what I created. As for Vivian, after her own fashion startup failed due to financial mismanagement, she went back to accounting at a small firm. Then came layoffs. Now, she's pinning her hopes on a new opportunity she has no idea I created. I don't know if she'll ever see me as an equal. To Vivian, I'll always be the little sister with her head in the clouds and a bunch of old laptops. But she's about to walk into a space where every wall, every budget model, every analytics tool was designed by me. And what I wonder most is this. When she sees my name, Eleanor Green, at the bottom corner of her paycheck or the next budget draft, will she recognize it? Or will she still believe I'm just a faded extra in the dazzling world she chases? A part of me hopes she never finds out. Another part wants to see her face when the truth finally hits. I don't need her admiration. I just want her to stop looking down on me. That night, back in my quiet apartment on the 18th floor, Seattle's sky was wrapped in a soft mist like a velvet curtain after a show. I pulled out my laptop, logged into Dataloom's internal system, thousands of lines of code and reports I knew by heart. The first notification popped up from HR. Recommended candidate, Vivian Green. I leaned back in my chair, eyes settling on the file on screen. I had expected this moment, but still, my heart paused for a beat. Her smiling photo, dressed in a beige blazer, stood out on the application form. I skimmed through her experience, skills, and the internal reviewer's note. Confident demeanor, strong communicator, well-suited for the budget analyst role. Recommend for next round interview. I didn't type a word, just clicked the 3 dots in the corner. A window appeared. Forward, code, cop, pro. I clicked approve. She got the job. No one at the company, except Sam, knew I was a co-founder. From day one, we agreed to use only Sam's name on all media and public documents. I didn't want my image floating around the internet. I'd seen too many people lose their personal lives chasing fame. I didn't need praise. I needed freedom. So within Dataloom, I was simply Eleanor, the senior technical advisor who usually worked remotely. I only came into the office once a week, after 6 p.m. The rest of the time, I led projects, approved spending, and mapped out strategies, all from behind the scenes. Sam was the one in front of cameras, shaking hands with investors and speaking at tech conferences. He always respected my choice, never once revealing my identity to employees or the press. I used to wonder if that decision was the right one, but now, watching Vivian step into the world I built with my own hands, I was certain staying silent was the only way to make this moment interesting. On her first day at work, I stayed home, just as scheduled. But I turned on the internal camera system, something very few people knew I designed. From a low-angle view in the shared kitchen on the 9th floor, I saw her standing near the espresso machine, eyes wide with surprise as she looked at the digital bulletin board displaying the company's ongoing projects. This is the new company that hired me. she told a colleague proudly. Word is, the two founders are super private. No one's ever seen the other one. Might just be a legal placeholder. I chuckled softly. It wasn't the first time I'd heard someone question the existence of the second co-founder. That afternoon, Sam video called me. She's off to a decent start, he said, sipping coffee. Confident, maybe a bit showy, but competent. Are you sure about this? She still has no idea who you are, Eleanor. For now, let's keep it that way, I replied. Just don't slip. If she's good, this is a great opportunity. If she's not, the truth will come out faster. This wasn't about revenge. I didn't want her to fail, nor did I seek payback. I just wanted to know, how would Vivian behave when no one recognized her? When there was no spotlight, no audience clapping? A week passed, then 2. Each time I came into the office after hours, she had already left. I kept my routine, approving budgets at night, reviewing HR files in the silence of empty halls and idle elevators. Until one day, I was in the basement server room checking the security system when I heard high heels echoing in the hallway. I stepped out and there she was, frozen in the doorway. Eleanor? She asked, startled and suspicious. I nodded calmly. Hi. She squinted. What are you doing down here? Only senior management has access to this area. I smiled. Well, I guess I have special access. She tilted her head, about to say something, when Sam stepped out from the adjacent room holding a folder. Hey, Eleanor, could you take a look at the new AI deployment plan? Needs your sign-off by Friday. I took the file and looked back at Vivian. Her eyes froze. There was no need for words. I knew in that moment the seed of doubt had been planted. And now I'd see... Would she finally see me? Or still view me as the harmless shadow she always believed I was? That morning, Seattle had a light drizzle. I had just signed off on the latest quarterly report when my phone rang. It was Sam. Eleanor, something funny just happened. I think Vivian's starting to get curious, he said with a hint of amusement. I looked up at my screen. A new email from accounting popped up. NS signature found in internal budget file. Please confirm approving authority. My heart slowed. It was time. Nearly 2 months had passed since Vivian officially joined Dataloom as a budget analyst. In that time, she had begun earning favor in a few departments, thanks to her confidence and persuasive skills. I had watched from afar, quietly approving her proposals and saying nothing. But she had started noticing details. During one budget approval for marketing, Vivian stumbled upon a file signed with an e-signature, clearly labeled Eleanor Green, NS. Alongside it was the co-founder's ID code. I knew she wouldn't let that go. The next morning, I overheard a snippet of conversation in the cafe downstairs. A young colleague whispered to Vivian, "Who's this NS person anyway? Like a ghost in the system. Never seen them, but they sign off on everything big." Vivian smirked. "Probably just a legal figurehead. I don't trust names without faces." Behind a wooden partition, I tightened my grip on my coffee cup. Don't trust. She'd learn soon enough. 3 days later, she walked straight into accounting and requested access to the full budget record for the most recent quarter. With her clearance, she opened file after file, until she reached the one where my name appeared again and again, beside documents outlining Dataloom's financial core. Not just signatures, but dates, file IDs, legal assessments. Every key piece carried my name. The same sister who believed I lived off the family's kindness was now staring at proof that I wasn't just any employee. I was the one who had approved her paycheck, the one behind the very reports she worked with every day. That afternoon, I got a system alert. Internal access request from account Vivian Green, Dartag Dataloom, founding records. She had reached the master file. I pictured her sitting there, soft blue light illuminating her face as she saw the founding documents for the first time. Eleanor Green and Samuel Fletcher. 50/50 ownership. Role description: Chief Technical Architect. Ms. Green. Her heart must have clenched. I knew her. When she's shocked, she doesn't scream or cause a scene. She goes silent. But her eyes blaze. Then she starts trying to prove, this can't be real. That same afternoon, I arrived at the office earlier than usual. I wanted to see her reaction with my own eyes. Sure enough, when I entered the pantry, I saw Vivian standing alone, gripping the edge of the counter, staring at a printed page. I approached gently. You okay? She turned, eyes locked on mine, furious and confused. Eleanor, she said, voice tight. You're the co-founder? I didn't answer immediately. I just nodded. How long? She asked. Since the beginning, I replied calmly. Sam and I started this company in a tiny room near Capitol Hill, back when you thought I was unemployed. Vivian laughed, not mockingly, but bitterly, half disbelief, half self-directed irony. So all this time, you were signing my paycheck. I worked under you? I nodded again. Not out of pride, Vivian, just doing my job. You're capable, so I approved your promotion. If you weren't, I'd have done the opposite. She fell silent, eyes dropping to the floor. I pulled a sheet from my pocket. A budget plan for an upcoming initiative on tech education for underprivileged kids. We're launching this soon. If you're interested, I think you'd be a great fit. She didn't take the paper. But her eyes changed. Something had shifted. I turned to leave, not pushing her. She'd need time. But for the first time in years, I saw in her eyes not scorn, but a silent question. How many times have I misjudged my little sister? The 5-year Dataloom anniversary gala was held in a glass building by Lake Union, where chandelier light danced like ripples across the floor. I stood in the guest dressing room, staring into the mirror. A long black dress, minimalist but elegant, fit snugly against a frame worn from years of all-nighters. My hair was pinned neatly, lips brushed with soft pink. I didn't want to stand out, but it wasn't about what I wanted anymore. Sam knocked, peeking in. Ready, Eleanor? I swallowed hard. Not really, but I guess no one's ever truly ready to step out of the dark. He laughed. You're not stepping out, you're stepping up. We walked onto the stage from the wings as the lights dimmed. The MC had just finished. And now, please welcome the 2 co-founders of Dataloom, Samuel Fletcher and Eleanor Green. Applause erupted, loud, clear, electric. Every eye turned toward me as I stepped into the light for the first time, officially and without a mask. I smiled, quietly but with purpose. And then I saw Vivian. She stood at the back of the room, one hand clutching a champagne glass she hadn't touched, her face stunned, her world flipped upside down. I knew that feeling. I'd lived it. On the day we landed our first $1 million investment, that moment when something no one thought was real becomes undeniable. Sam spoke first. He shared our journey from his mom's garage to Dataloom's current HQ, about server crashes at 2 a.m., deadlines that left us passed out on keyboards. When he passed the mic to me, the room fell silent. I took a deep breath. Hi, everyone. I'm Eleanor Green, and I guess, for many of you, this is the first time you've actually seen me. A gentle wave of laughter rolled through the crowd. It wasn't mocking, it was warm surprise. I continued, I'm not great at public speaking, and I never imagined I'd be up here. But 5 years ago, Sam and I had 2 things. An idea and a belief that technology could be built on trust. I glanced down at the audience. Vivian was still standing there, no longer holding her drink. Her eyes were fixed on me, as if trying to make sense of a stranger wearing the face of someone she once knew. I know I'm not the public face of this company, I went on, and that was entirely my choice. But today, I felt I owed you my presence, not for fame, but out of gratitude. Applause rose again. I nodded in thanks, then stepped back to let the MC close the ceremony. As the lights shifted to dinner, I made my way toward the buffet, looking for a quiet corner. But with every step, someone stopped me to chat. "We thought you were a legend," one software engineer laughed. "Didn't think you actually existed." I smiled, made a few polite replies, but my mind kept drifting back to Vivian. I glanced toward the pillar where she'd stood. Empty. She had left. And I didn't know when she'd gone or how much of my speech she'd heard. But I felt something, an empty space quietly opening inside me, where there should have been a warm look from someone close. That night, back in my apartment, I kicked off my shoes and sank into the sofa. My phone lit up with dozens of congratulatory messages from colleagues, partners, even my parents. "We're so proud of you, sweetheart. Words can't describe it." But nothing from Vivian. I replayed the live stream of the event on the company website, skipped ahead to my speech, then hit pause. I didn't need to watch it again. I just wanted to know one thing. In that moment, under the spotlight, what did Vivian see? A stranger? Or the little sister she once believed would never amount to anything? 2 days after the gala, I arrived at the office earlier than usual. Not for a meeting or to sign off on documents, just to finish something personal. I opened the drawer in the 10th floor conference room and pulled out a small walnut box I'd kept since college. Inside, I placed a navy linen-covered notebook, a black ink pen, and a handwritten card. It took me over an hour to write just a few lines. Not fancy, not poetic, just honest. "Vivian, thank you for your efforts at Datalum. You're truly capable, and I believe you'll go far. I'm proud to work with you, even if we began in silence. Eleanor." I folded the card, tucked it inside the notebook, and handed it to the internal delivery assistant with a quiet instruction. "Please give this to Vivian Green, no sender name." I wasn't expecting a reply. The gift wasn't an olive branch, it was just an open door, quiet and without pressure. So she could walk through if she chose to. The rest of the week passed with no message. No email, no thank you. But I noticed a few things. Vivian no longer sat back with crossed arms during meetings. She started taking detailed notes, asked sharp questions, and gave focused input. One afternoon, I stood outside the hallway, listening as she presented a revised budget strategy for an AI project that had gone over cost. Her voice was calm, clear. Her eyes no longer carried competitiveness, but something rarer: focus. I didn't walk in. I just stood there, hands in my pockets, and nodded silently. The following week, HR announced that Vivian had proposed a new internal sponsorship initiative for junior employees, especially female interns in tech roles. She recommended allocating a portion of the CSR budget to host a series of free career workshops led by department heads. I read the proposal 3 times, slowly. Initiative name: Touch the Screen, Touch the Future. And right below it, in italics, inspired by the quiet mission of Eleanor Green. I set the file down on the table, pressing my lips together gently. That afternoon, I stopped by the pantry as usual. Vivian was there, pouring hot water into a tea carafe. When she turned and saw me, we both froze for a second. But this time, her gaze was softer. No tension, no defensiveness. I was about to pass when she suddenly spoke. "The pen is beautiful, and the notebook. I've written a few pages." I turned to her. "I'm glad you liked it." She gave a small nod. I think I ever really understood you. Or maybe I just never tried." I smiled without answering. "There is something I want to say," she continued, voice lower. "You didn't have to give me a chance, but you did. And you never brought any of it up. You didn't diminish me to prove a point. That says more about you than anything else ever could." For the first time, I no longer saw Vivian as the teenager basking in the spotlight with a trophy in hand. I saw a woman learning to let go of pride and truly see others. "I don't know if I can make it right," she said slowly. "But I'll try." I nodded, feeling a weight lift from my chest. We don't need to tally up the past. We just start from today. We stood side by side for a moment longer. No explanation needed, no apology required, just a quiet understanding. This time, things would be different. And somehow, they were. Vivian stopped being the loudest person in the room. She learned to listen, gave space to younger voices, and didn't shy away from tasks she once thought beneath her. And I stopped hiding behind my screen. I began speaking at technical briefings, no longer dodging the camera. I stood before visiting students and shared my journey, not to boast, but to show them, you don't have to be the loudest to make something big. One weekend afternoon, as I was leaving the office, I saw Vivian standing before the recognition wall. The list of top contributors for the quarter. Her name was at the top. She looked at me and gave a small nod. Thank you for not giving up on me. I smiled. We're just getting started, Vivian. On Sunday, the whole family gathered at our usual brunch spot on the corner of Green Lake. Everything was just as it had always been. Dark wood chairs, sunlight filtering through striped curtains, and the smell of warm waffles filling the room. But something in the air felt different. I sat at the long table on the balcony, joined by my parents, Uncle Henry, Aunt Laura, and Vivian. She arrived 5 minutes late, but instead of wearing her usual flashy outfit or sparkling heels, she had on a simple white blouse, dark jeans, her hair neatly tied back, no makeup. As she approached me, her eyes hesitated, but then she gave a small nod. I nodded back. No words needed, just a look. That was enough. My mom was telling a story about her new flower bed when Uncle Henry suddenly chuckled and turned to me. So, Eleanor, are you still doing that little freelance thing from home, or just typing up random computer codes all day? I smiled. Not surprised. He still thought programming was just a souped-up video game. I didn't even have time to answer before a voice rang out clearly. Uncle, Vivian said, setting down her coffee and looking straight ahead. Eleanor is the smartest person I've ever known, and without her, I definitely wouldn't be where I am today. All eyes turned to her. I tilted my head slightly. But Vivian didn't shrink back like she usually did when put in the spotlight. She stood firm, gaze steady, voice unwavering. I used to think I knew everything, she continued. But Eleanor taught me something more important than knowledge: humility. Her quietness doesn't mean she has nothing to say. It means she chooses to act instead of show off. Uncle Henry looked stunned. Aunt Laura gave a subtle nod. My mother reached over and gently squeezed my hand. I didn't say anything. I just looked at her. And in that look, I saw everything words couldn't express: an unspoken apology, unvoiced gratitude, and respect, earned not by blood, but by truth. A moment later, the conversation shifted back to the weather and the upcoming holidays, but I knew something important had just happened. After the meal, as people began to leave the table, I stood up to grab my bag. Vivian stepped over, jacket in hand. She didn't say a word, but as she passed by, she whispered softly, "You don't have to forgive me, but I'll never be the same person again." I turned to her, and for the first time in a very long while, I gave her a genuine smile. "I know," I said, "and I never needed you to apologize." We walked out of the brunch spot in silence, but there was no longer any tension between us. What had happened wasn't forgotten, but it no longer lived in me like a wound. That afternoon, I went home, made myself a cup of tea, opened my laptop, and stared out the window toward Lake Union. Just as I took a sip of the warm tea, a message from Sam popped up. "Heard brunch wasn't half bad today?" I replied. "Not bad, let's call it a new beginning." And maybe, sometimes, forgiveness doesn't come through words. It comes when people finally see each other, not through judgment, but through late, honest understanding. Vivian and I will never be picture-perfect sisters. But now, we're no longer standing on opposite sides. We're two grown women who've learned from their own mistakes. And to me, that's a beautiful enough ending to one chapter, and a gentle start to the next. The story between Vivian and me taught me that sometimes understanding doesn't come from grand apologies, but from quiet, genuine change. It took me years to accept that being seen isn't the only measure of worth, but when truth is finally acknowledged, no rebuttal is needed. Silence is enough to make people reflect. Real life doesn't ask for perfection, only the courage to grow and the grace to begin again. What do you think about Eleanor and Vivian's journey? Can a late understanding be enough to mend a relationship that once seemed broken? Share your thoughts. And don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt family stories. My name is Olivia. When I was 16, my parents said they wanted the whole family to take a relaxing vacation. Just the three of us. No little brother, no work calls, no distractions. I thought they were joking. But when they booked tickets to Italy, I believed them. "This will be a fresh start," my mom said, her voice light as air, though her eyes didn't meet mine. I wasn't a perfect daughter. I failed science, got into shouting matches with classmates, and was called to the principal's office a few times. But I never imagined those would be reasons enough for them to take me out of the country and then disappear. At first, the trip looked just like a typical holiday postcard. Rome glowing in golden sunlight, cobbled streets, icy gelato melting on the tongue. We took pictures at the Trevi Fountain. My mom hugged me gently from behind while my dad held the camera like we were truly a family trying to heal old wounds. I wanted to believe it. I really did. That morning, we had breakfast at the cafe below the hotel. Dad ordered his usual black espresso. Mom picked a pastry and wore her brick red lipstick, the one she only used on special occasions. I sat across from them, eating and texting my best friend back home. "It's okay. I think they're really trying." Then my mom looked at me and said, barely louder than a whisper, "Let's take a walk, pick up a few souvenirs. Just 15 minutes. I nodded, not thinking twice. But 15 minutes turned into an hour, then 2, then 3. No texts, no calls. No one came back. I stumbled to the front desk, asking for my parents' names. The receptionist looked confused, then said, "They checked out this morning." I froze. I ran upstairs and pounded on the hotel room door, but my keycard no longer worked. A staff member helped open it. Inside, empty. No luggage, no clothes, not a single sign I had ever belonged there. My phone was dead. I had no passport, no cash. Even my small backpack, my constant companion, had vanished without me noticing. I collapsed in the hallway, hands shaking, heart pounding. Every call to my parents went straight to voicemail. I kept texting, one frantic message after another. "Where are you? Is this a joke? I'm really freaking out." No reply. That night, I slept on a bench at the train station. The wind off the tracks was sharp and cold against my face. Every train whistle echoed like a slash through the silence. I had imagined many awful scenarios in my life, but never this, that my own parents would leave me behind, in a foreign country. The next morning, I found a small folded note in my jacket pocket, written in my mom's familiar handwriting. "You're 16, old enough to survive." No apology, no explanation. Just one sentence, cold, final, and ringing in my head like the last snap of a thread I'd been clinging to. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know where to go. Everything had disappeared. Not in a nightmare, but in a painfully real moment. And I realized they didn't just leave me behind. They had erased me from their lives. I don't remember how long I walked after leaving the hotel. Just that my feet burned, my eyes stung from exhaustion, and my stomach screamed for anything. I wandered the cobbled streets of Rome, tucking myself into narrow alleys to avoid strangers' stares. Night fell quickly, colder than I expected. No blanket, no one, just a stone bench under the shuttered front of a store. I curled up, arms wrapped around my stomach, trying not to cry, but the tears came anyway. Every honk, every footstep made me flinch. I had never felt fear like that, Not fear of the dark, but fear of belonging nowhere at all. By the third day, hunger had dulled all taste to bitterness. I passed a tiny bakery on the corner of Via Mariulana. The smell of baking flour and melting butter teased every cell in my body. I stopped. A tray of fresh baguettes rested on the windowsill, probably left to cool. I didn't think. My hand reached out. Quick, sneaky. Just hoping to grab one before anyone saw. But another hand caught my wrist first. I froze. Trying to steal? The voice was low, firm. No anger, no scolding. I turned slowly. A woman, around her 60s, hair white as snow tied into a bun, flour-speckled apron, stood in front of me. She looked right into me, like she could read everything I didn't say. I said nothing. I couldn't. Hungry. I nodded, barely, as if moving too much might shatter me. You take bread, you wash trays. Until I can see my reflection in them, I don't believe my ears, but she wasn't joking. She unlocked the door and gestured me inside. Her name was Marta. She had owned Forno di Marta for over 30 years. No husband, no kids, just an old oven, an aging cat named Espresso, and hands hardened by flour and fire. That night, I scrubbed nearly 20 baking trays caked in oil and burnt crumbs. The water was freezing, the vinegar cleaner clung to my skin, but I had never felt so grateful. Good enough, Marta said when I finished the last one. Upstairs, last room, down the hall. Old mattress, thin blanket. Not fancy, but better than the street. I stood silent, wanting to ask why she did this, but she had already turned, back to her rising dough. The room was tiny, barely fit a bed, a desk, and a flickering yellow lamp. I curled under the faded blanket. For the first time in days, I slept. No train whistles, no hunger pangs, no fear of being forgotten. The next morning, Marta was already baking before sunrise. I smelled coffee. I stepped into the kitchen, and before I could speak, she placed a warm croissant in my hand. Eat. Then learn to shape dough. She never asked about my past, never asked why I was alone. Maybe she already knew. Or maybe she understood that some questions are best left unanswered. Day by day, I learned to feel when the dough was just right, to twist my wrist to dust evenly, to gauge the oven heat by its hum. Marta didn't teach with instructions. She taught with glances, with do-overs, with quiet corrections like, better next time. I didn't know how long I'd stay. I didn't know what tomorrow held. But in that little kitchen, with a meowing cat and the warmth of the oven, I started to believe I might survive. Maybe even begin again. In the early months at Marta's bakery, I just existed. But once the hunger faded and my hands adapted to flour and fire, I started to think beyond survival. I couldn't remain the abandoned girl forever. I needed to do something for myself, beyond myself, or at least discover who I was without anyone guiding me. One morning, while taking out the trash behind the bakery, I found an old backpack dumped near the bins. For some reason, I opened it. Inside was a cracked laptop, scratched all over, charger cable frayed. I nearly threw it away, until I thought, what if it still works? I smuggled it upstairs, used kitchen tape to hold the charger together. 3 days later, after many failed attempts, the screen flickered on. Dim, slow, but it lit up. My first self-made light. I used free Wi-Fi from the cafe next door, standing by the window for signal. I didn't know what I was looking for. Until I found a free GED prep site. I signed up. By day, I baked, scrubbed, served. By night, I crouched by a tiny third-floor window, relearning math, reading American history in English that now felt foreign. I scribbled chemistry formulas on the back of pastry boxes, underlining them with borrowed ink pens from Marta, who still never asked why I studied. As long as you're trying, she once said while slicing apples for a tart. That's enough. Nearly a year later, I took the GED. The test was at a small community center, 2 bus rides from the bakery. I passed. Not perfectly, but enough to prove I could do more than survive. I'm not sure why I grew obsessed with business. Maybe because I feared dependency? I started reading about finance, beginner articles, then forums, then complex analyses I needed a dictionary to understand. I devoured it all, like my brain was as starved as my body once was. One day, while wiping tables, I spotted a crumpled magazine someone left behind. The cover read, "Small Italian Startup Restructures for Global Growth." I didn't grasp it all, but I saw a tiny stock code at the bottom. That night, I borrowed a prepaid Visa card from a bakery supplier, someone I'd helped tutor his son in English, and used the €100, 0 cents, I'd saved to invest. I didn't expect anything. I just wanted to see if what I'd learned mattered. 2 weeks later, the stock doubled. Then tripled. I watched the numbers flash on screen, heart pounding out of my chest. Not because I was rich, but because, for the first time ever, I saw direct results from what I had learned, done, believed in. Without being told, I cashed out and split the profits. Half bought a new espresso machine for the bakery. The old one had been leaking since last month. The other half I kept, for a dream I hadn't yet named. That night, as I was copying down a list of free finance websites into my little notebook, Marta looked at me and tilted her head. "You've changed," she said. "You used to walk like the floor might collapse under you. Now you walk like you know where you're going." I didn't know how to respond, but inside I whispered something to myself. I wasn't just the abandoned girl anymore. I didn't know when it happened, but the numbers on the screen no longer scared me. They became familiar, like the smell of fresh bread in the morning, like the clatter of the mixer each afternoon. After a few small investments, I saved enough to buy a brand new laptop. For the first time in my life, something just for me. I studied financial planning, supply chain optimization, even basic contract writing. All of it was free, from YouTube videos made by strangers to blog posts buried deep in corners of the internet written by people who had once gone bankrupt and climbed their way back. I scribbled notes on the backs of pastry wrappers, cardboard box flaps, any scrap I could find. One evening, after helping Marta close the shop, I sat in front of the new espresso machine, the gift I'd secretly ordered with profit from my second investment. She looked at me and said something I'll never forget. "You're not the girl digging through trash behind the bakery anymore, Olivia." I stayed quiet, because she was right. When I turned 19, I registered my first business license under the name Livia Consulting, just different enough that no one could trace it to me, but still felt like mine. I started by helping tourists understand the local market, guiding them on smarter currency exchanges, even helping some invest in small Italian startups. Then, from the people I had helped, I got referred to international students, people without legal documents, struggling with part-time jobs and skyrocketing rent. I taught them how to open digital bank accounts, how to find online income opportunities without ever leaving their tiny rented rooms. I showed them how to save every euro, and how one day that same euro could fund the dream they thought they'd lost. I didn't charge a fixed fee. Some gave me thank you gifts, phone credit, a pizza dinner, or a handwritten card. I kept every one, not for their value, but because they proved something I never used to believe. I could help someone. Marta didn't ask questions, as usual, but she knew. She saw me pay the gas bill when she sighed at the mailbox. She said nothing when I installed a new security camera after someone broke the bakery window. And on a crisp fall morning, when I handed her the first smartphone she'd ever owned, with large fonts and a speed dial button labeled Livia, she simply smiled, sipped her coffee, and nodded. "This old lady doesn't get these apps," she said, "but she knows how to say thank you." I still kept in touch with a few people from the US, people I once called used to know, but I never told them what I was doing. I didn't post anything online except the occasional photo of pastries to promote the shop. No one knew that Olivia, the girl once left behind in Rome, was now the quiet financial advisor to nearly 30 clients across Europe. I started sending money back to the US, not to my family, but to youth support centers in Ohio, the state I once lived in. Each month, I picked a different program. A life skills summer camp, a free coding class, a mental health group for teens rejected by their families. I never put my name. I just signed. From someone who survived. One day, Marta found me slumped over the counter, surrounded by finance papers and glowing spreadsheets. "What are you building?" she asked. I looked up and smiled. For the first time, truly. A place for people no one believes in. To start over. She stared at me for a long time, then said quietly, "Then don't forget to start with yourself." That night, I stood outside the closed bakery, watching the streetlight cast its glow on the stone pavement. I understood more clearly than ever. I was no longer a deleted footnote in someone else's story. I was writing my own. I was in the flower room, flipping through financial reports for a client, when Marta walked in, holding a crumpled newspaper someone had left on the morning coffee table. She didn't say anything. She simply placed it on the stainless steel counter and tapped a small box in the lower right corner of the real estate section. I leaned down. The dim light hit the bolded print. Foreclosure property, lakefront lot, Westwoods, Cincinnati, Ohio. Auction at end of month. I looked closer at the address. Every number, every letter carried weight. I'd written that address on hundreds of school forms. I knew every crack in the road in front of that house, every creaky hinge that groaned in the wind. It was the house my parents bought after they abandoned me in Rome. The one I'd seen in photos they posted online with fake captions like, "Fresh start. Grateful for the peace life has given us." Now, that house was listed for foreclosure. I sat in silence, not because I was sad, but because somehow the world had just handed me back a key I thought was lost forever, a key to something that had never really closed. "What are you going to do?" Marta asked, eyes sharp as if she could see straight through me. I didn't answer right away, but that night, when the oven was off, I opened my laptop and began researching the auction. No one could know who I really was. If they recognized me, everything would fall apart. I registered for the auction under Livia Consulting, using perfectly legal paperwork. The business account was ready. The funds were ready. Not much for the wealthy, but enough, after 3 years of cautious investing. Everything was arranged quietly. I booked my flight to the US for the first time in 4 years. On the connecting flight from Rome to New York, I didn't sleep. I just stared out the window, where the thick layers of clouds looked like a foreign land. I used to think I'd never return, but I understood now. This wasn't returning, it was coming back, with a different role. I arrived in Cincinnati on a freezing early winter morning. The auction was held outdoors, in a parking lot outside the county administration building. People stood in small groups, thick coats, numbered paddles, documents in hand. I wore a charcoal gray suit, my hair tied up, thin-rimmed glasses. No one looked at me twice. Marta stood beside me, calm as a steady tree. When I leaned in to whisper a number, she raised the paddle, on time, without hesitation. The price climbed faster than I expected. A middle-aged man, likely a broker, kept bidding. Every time Marta raised our number, he glanced our way, confused by the 2 unfamiliar women. I didn't blink. When the auctioneer's gavel came down and announced sold to number 162, I didn't smile. I didn't exhale. I just stared at the printed confirmation from the mobile printer. The address they once called home, now under a company I built from the wreckage they left behind. I didn't feel victory or revenge. What I felt was closure. Like I'd finally shut a door I was once too afraid to walk through. We left the lot in silence. Only when we were in the car did Marta speak. "You could have walked away, but you looked it in the eye." That's the difference between running and continuing. I turned to her. Her eyes held sorrow but no fear. Maybe because she understood, just like I did. Sometimes, to be truly free, you have to return to the place that caged you and unlock the door yourself. I nodded. And I knew the hardest part was just beginning. The meeting was scheduled at a small real estate office on the outskirts of Cincinnati, the kind used for signing deeds or renegotiating rental agreements. I chose it on purpose. Quiet, private, no nosy stares or gossiping voices. Everything had been arranged through my attorney, the only one who knew the full truth of my identity in this deal. I arrived 15 minutes early, neatly dressed, hair in a high bun, wireframe glasses, no makeup, but a cold, composed expression. I sat alone in the conference room with a glass of water, listening to the ticking clock, not afraid, just quiet. Like I was watching my 16-year-old self again, curled up in a strange city, waiting for an answer that never came. The door opened. 2 people walked in. My mother wore a beige cardigan and oversized sunglasses that covered half her face. Her chin was high, still clinging to a faded elegance like she was in control. My father trailed behind, clutching a worn leather folder, head low, steps hesitant. They sat across from me, showing nothing but a strange caution. They didn't recognize me. Not a flicker of hesitation, not a familiar gesture. To them, I was just the rep from a company that had bought the house they were living in. I took off my glasses. The moment stretched like a slash through the air. My mother stiffened, lips parting as if to speak, but no words came. My father blinked twice, then looked down. Avoiding my eyes like facing me meant facing a nightmare he'd long buried. "We've met before," I said, voice steady. "In Rome, when I was 16. My mother swallowed hard, fingers gripping her purse strap. We thought it would be easier for you," she said, her voice fraying. "We thought if we disappeared, you'd hate us less." I tilted my head, suppressing a bitter smile. "Instead of saying goodbye, you chose to disappear completely. Left me in a foreign country, no money, no passport, no message except old enough to survive." My father still wouldn't look up. I flicked the deed and slid it across the table. "I'm the one who bought the house you live in. The paperwork is fully legal. You have 30 days to leave." "You can't do this," my mother whispered. This time, there were real tears, but I knew they weren't from regret, only fear. "Can't?" I leaned back. "I used to wait for you to come back for me. Just once. But that never happened. I don't need an apology anymore. I need closure." Marta walked in right then, holding a folder. She said nothing, just placed it on the table and gave me a sharp, calm nod. "We'll send the formal move-out schedule tomorrow," she said, voice colder than steel. "If you need help relocating, our company can refer someone." My mother shook her head, nearly sobbing. "We're family, Olivia." I stood. Family doesn't abandon each other in a foreign country and walk away like their child never existed. You made your choice, and now I've made mine. I walked out without looking back. I didn't need to hear another word. I had lived long enough in silence to know this. Sometimes words don't need to be long, just timely. And I had just reclaimed the one thing they took from me, my right to choose. Less than a week after the meeting, I began to see my name appear on social media. Not in congratulations, but in venomous posts from the very person who gave birth to me. She's been poisoned by money and power and came back to steal her parents' home. We just wanted her to grow up strong. We didn't expect she'd return as a stranger. Cold and cruel. Under each post were hundreds of comments. Some were sympathetic, some furious, but most came from people I had never met, ready to judge a daughter who had kicked her parents out. I didn't respond. I didn't need to win online. I just needed to win in real life. Right after they moved out of the house, on time, without a word, I began renovating everything. The house that once symbolized betrayal was now becoming the foundation for something else. A safe place for girls who had been abandoned, just like me. I renamed the house Second Light, because I believe sometimes the first light goes out too soon, but that doesn't mean it's the last. I repainted the worn yellow walls in a soft, calming blue, got rid of the cold, heavy furniture and replaced it with cozy fabric sofas, warm bedside lamps, and secondhand bookshelves I collected from local libraries. The Live, Laugh, Love sign that used to hang in the living room was replaced with a simple framed quote, "You were not made to be invisible." The master bedroom became a shared space. I put in 2 bunk beds, each with its own little world, new mattresses, soft body pillows, and lockboxes for personal belongings. Marta, or as the girls later called her, Mama Marta, took charge of the kitchen. She taught them how to knead dough, how to keep an oven's temperature steady, how to make a perfect peach tart. But more than that, she taught them patience and trust, something it had taken me a long time to relearn. Our first session had 3 girls. Jamie, 17, kicked out after revealing she didn't follow her family's religion. Asha, 18, who wandered near the train station after her stepfather refused to take her in when her mother passed. And Zoe, 15, who didn't speak a word for the first week, just stared at the floor and nodded when spoken to. I didn't ask too many questions. I just said, "If you're here today, then you deserve to stay." We had dinner together every Saturday. I didn't allow phones at the table. Hands held spoons, mouths could smile or stay silent, if that's what someone needed. No one was forced. But slowly, short answers turned into stories. Silence gave way to laughter. One day, I saw Zoe quietly place a slice of Marta's toast on Jamie's windowsill, with a folded note, "In case you're hungry tonight." I didn't intervene. I just stood in the hallway, leaning against the wall, and smiled quietly. I continued my online consulting work. Part of the earnings went to keeping Second Light running. The rest went to funding job training programs and online courses for the girls. No one needed to know where the money came from. All they had to know was here. No one would ever be left behind again. Every time a new girl arrived, I took her upstairs to what used to be my bedroom. It had been split into an office and a reading nook. I let her sit down, then pointed to the wooden sign above the bookshelf. The words were carved by hand. "We don't promise to replace your old family, but we will not disappear." Then I handed her a pair of slippers, clean pajamas, and asked one question. "Tonight, would you rather sleep or talk?" The answer didn't matter. What mattered was, she had a choice. I didn't need to explain myself to the world. Because this house, the laughter from the kitchen, and Jamie's shy morning hugs were the only answers I ever needed. I didn't need validation from the past. I just needed to turn it into a foundation for something better. And now? I had. That afternoon, the sunset poured through the big glass window behind the kitchen, bathing everything in gold. From the edge of the table to Zoe's hair as she folded napkins quietly at the corner. The scent of cinnamon cookies mixed with the giggles upstairs. Asha and Jamie were fighting over tonight's playlist. It was a special evening. The 1-year anniversary of Second Light. I stood by the old door frame that used to whistle with wind on freezing nights when I was the forgotten child. Now, that very frame held a string of tiny lights, twinkling gently after dark. Nothing fancy, no flashy decorations, just things that truly belonged to people, not appearances. Marta stood at the counter, sleeves rolled up, showing a new girl how to slice apples safely. Her name was Eliza, 14, quiet and jumpy when someone raised their voice. But under Marta's hands, she softened. I watched them, then looked away, afraid to break that small, fragile moment. Because I knew, for Eliza, those apple slices were more than just fruit. They were the first taste of what it meant to stay. The door creaked open. Jamie peeked in, hair in a lopsided bun, voice excited. "Olivia, we found your old Bluetooth speaker. It's ours now." I laughed softly. Hands up in surrender. Just don't play rock at midnight, deal? Jamie winked and vanished upstairs, laughter trailing behind. The party started soon after. No big cake, no confetti, just warm food, music, and the kind of glances that said more than any family dinner I'd ever had before. Everyone brought something, a story, a keepsake, a whispered wish. We called it the relight ritual. I stayed behind after everyone had gone to their rooms or sat on the porch listening to Marta's old Italian tales. Alone in the warm kitchen light, I held a cup of herbal tea that had long gone cold. On the table was the framed note I'd hung on the first day of renovations. Not a family photo, not childhood memories, but a piece of paper with these words: "We don't begin in perfect places, but we begin again, together." I closed my eyes. And for the first time in years, I didn't hear echoes from the past. No flashbacks of standing alone in a Roman square. No quiet ache of a forgotten child. I saw Eliza asleep on the armchair. Jamie tucked a blanket over her, spoon still in hand. Asha turned on the hallway light, casting a soft glow through the window. Marta stood outside, broom in hand, humming an old Italian song as she swept leaves. Everything in this house once carried the stain of betrayal. Every creak, every shadow, every door I once hated. Now they were filled with laughter, warmth, and new life. I stepped into the backyard, looking up at the golden lights glowing under the porch. The night sky was clear, stars twinkling, wind rustling through the trees like a gentle blessing. Second light wasn't just a shelter. It was a declaration. Proof to anyone who had ever been abandoned, labeled a burden, or made to feel invisible that we don't need to be accepted to exist. We just need a place to begin again. The right way. I looked back at the house, no longer a ghost from memory, and whispered, for no one to hear but myself, "This isn't just a house. This is where we begin again. And this time, no one gets left behind." Olivia's story is proof that the wounds of the past don't need to be hidden or erased. They can become the foundation for something meaningful. From a girl left behind in a foreign land, she chose not revenge, but compassion and action. Second Light is more than a house. It's the rebirth of hearts once broken. In a world full of judgment, Olivia chose quiet healing and gave others the chance to start over, just as she once wished for herself. What do you think of Olivia's journey and the choices she made? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt and powerful stories about life and family.